You know what really, really grinds my gears? Intersectionalism or intersectionality or however you say it, that thing. And I know what you're going to say, right? But Noah, what did intersections ever do to you? And you know what they did to me. You know, with their smug stop signs and traffic signals and red lights, and nobody ever remembers that it's the car on your right that has the right of way. And every time I pull up to one of these intersectionalisms on my motorcycle, I almost always get sideswiped by some crazy lady driving a van, like eating a sandwich with one hand and talking on her phone with the other. And one time, even eating a bowl of noodles. And I don't even know how one opens a bowl of noodles in the car, let alone gets in a position to eat those noodles while they're driving with chopsticks, no less. But somehow, intersectionalism does this. And then it almost sideswipes me on a motorcycle because it's too busy eating noodles to notice the guy obeying traffic laws to its right and going through the intersectionalism and all the wait. No, sorry. Wrong kind of intersectionalism, right? I mean, this kind grinds my gears too, right? But the worst one is the intersectionalism that pretends to be radical but hides a deep reaction under its shiny veneer of woke hipster language and talk about oppression and liberation, right? And this intersectionalism, it's a product of the change of bourgeois ideology to its fully developed form that really hits a nodal point during the 2008 crisis of capitalism. Now, this was the era of internet politics, right? And the full divorce of social reality from online political cultures, where they became sort of subcultures, 4chan for rightists and Tumblr for leftists, basically. Tied to the bourgeois academy, as always, though, the Tumblr left took on a shape that reflected the changes happening in the US only a few decades down the line, right? As value divorces from price, sort of everything becomes more abstract. And it reflected the PMC class character of the people who became those institutions and the institutions that in turn embodied those people, right? And its premise was, you guessed it, right? Fully divorced from social reality, abstractions that stay in the realm of the abstract. Even when intersectionalism believes it's at its most concrete, speaking of real world things like oppression, it's still abstract. So, how does that happen? Well, it speaks in terms of fully deformed, sort of developed characteristics, right? Like most mistakes of metaphysics will. And honestly, this might be the primary ideological problem of the 21st century, this counting of characteristics in order to figure out what things are. It tells us that people all have different, separate aspects that we can consider oppressions, right? Or even privileges, right? That we're always told to check our privilege or whatever. This view, however, gives rise to sort of what the right has correctly begun calling the oppression Olympics, where people went beyond normal stuff and into the absurd and began making oppressions up. But here, I'm going to read you guys the standard definition that they give you everywhere so that we know exactly what we're talking about, right? And then we'll explain how you would have to be out of your cuckoo bird brain to think that this has anything remotely to do with Marxism or the liberation of humanity or the science of social development that Marx and Engels developed or any of that stuff, right? All right. Intersectionality is a sociological analytical framework, right, for understanding how social and political identities result in unique combinations of discrimination and privilege. Examples, hold on. All right, sorry about that. Examples of these factors include gender, caste, sex, race, ethnicity, class, sexuality, religion, disability, height, age, and weight. By the way, see what I mean about making things up? Weight, height, for real? What, did Trump enslave all the short and fat people while I wasn't looking? Anyway, continuing on. These intersecting and overlapping social identities may be both empowering and oppressing. Got me on what that means. Intersectionality broadens the scope of the first and second waves of feminism, it says, which largely focused on the experiences of women who were white, middle class, which is historically inaccurate. Anyway, continuing, to include the different experiences of women of color, poor women, immigrant women, and other groups. Intersectional feminism aims to separate itself from white feminism by acknowledging women's different experiences and identities. And can I just say that this reduction of all of these social ills to experiences is just absurd? Anyone can say that they have this experience or that experience, right? But that's not even the worst part, right? The worst part is when we reduce people to these already preconceived characteristics and extract them away from who they are as people, right? We remove what creates them and how they develop. When we do that, we stay abstract. We're dealing only in characteristics that are no longer attached to people, even when we believe we're being concrete, right? Rather than the Marxist view that say the women's struggle, right, is a particular form of the class struggle that it takes on due to particular historical conditions, which can unite working class people against their common enemy, the ruling class. It separates them and sets them against each other. It pretends that men are the enemy of women, and white women are the enemy of black women, and straight women are the enemy of gay women, and on and on and on and on and on, by taking this one characteristic that may intersect in a given individual and differentiating it, leaving it all on its own. But are straight women actually oppressing gay women? Of course not, right? The oppression is done by the ruling class, after all. Susan B. Anthony famously told Eugene Debs, "Give us the vote and we will give you socialism," showing a much more, materialist view of the women's struggle, right? That men in general were not the enemy of women, not the oppressor of women. In fact, women instead were aligned with men, materially speaking, so long as they were all working class, right? Think about this. During Bernie Sanders' presidential run, right, he famously got pushed off of his own microphone by two BLM liberals, right? And he stepped aside and he let them speak because that's what intersectionalism dictates, right? And what happened? They looked at this guy who was, for all his faults, trying to put together a new class-based movement as an oppressor. He was the enemy because that's what intersectionalism dictates, right? It draws these dividing lines between working class people where they don't exist in reality. And who does that serve? Only the ruling class, right? No matter how revolutionary they talk, when the actual concrete outcomes of the development of their ideology results in becoming a bulwark against the organization of the working class and setting it against itself, they become reactionaries. So is it any wonder that the ruling class has embraced intersectionalism and wokeism, that DEI workshops are dreamed up in corporate boardrooms, that those BLM liberals I mentioned worked for the Democratic Party and served to wreck attempts at working class organization? I don't think it is, right? And in this era of the working class all over the country waking up and realizing something's wrong and that, maybe we should do something about it, in the era following the revolution that was the civil rights movement, where unity across the color line is actually within our grasp for the first time in American history, it is precisely reactionary. It tries to take us backwards to a time when people were more separated by that color line. It tries to implant segregation once again through thought rather than through law. And it does so through all of these privileges and identities and oppressions, right? And that, my friends, is almost as bad as a lady coming inches from hitting me because she was eating goddamn noodles in a goddamn car.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only
Who's that? What's up, everybody? I'm Noah Krachevik. Welcome to Noah's show. It is the night of super secret surprise guests, and you guys all know him, Mr. John Malera of DD Geopolitics and the Political Bureau of the American Communist Party is here with us tonight. What's up, brother? How you doing tonight?
It's great to be here, man. That's always a moving intro. So shout out to the Midwestern Marks team for putting that whole thing together. Great intro, by the way. Hope we'll get into this issue of intersectionality a little bit more, and excited to be on here and take some calls with you.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you on here. I was getting an echo because I didn't have you set up right, but I just fixed that. That's on my end. Nobody else can hear it. I'm just weird. What's up, Daniel? He's always here with me because this show would fall to pieces without him. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, doing great. Just getting ready for the holiday sort of season, as it were. It's starting to get a little chilly here in the Big Apple, but everything's great. ACP going strong. Lots of amazing projects, lots of amazing work in the pipeline. Excited to have John on the show tonight, and to talk more about all this stuff, intersectionality, the woke brigade, and all this, all these postmodern ideologies, which we really need to get over as soon as possible because we really don't have time for this right now.
I'll tell you what, the worst thing about intersectionalism is when I get stuck at a red light. Just the worst.
Yeah, I didn't know where you were going with that. I thought you might be melting in a metaphor there, but it was good. We need a little levity these days. There's a lot of drama, a lot of stress, and it's nice to have Noah's dad jokes provide a little bit of relief.
Sometimes I'll just take them way too far, and people are like, is he even still joking? And it's funny to me because it's not funny, but they're like, it's just not funny, Noah.
Well, a little bit of behind the curtain without revealing too much. We have these chats, and we'll be talking about very serious things that happen over the course of the day. Fires that we have to put out and so on. Noah will just interject with the most blunt dad joke possible, and at first I'm just like, Noah, and then it kind of sets in, and it alleviates a little bit of my stress and my worries. So I always appreciate what you bring to the table, Noah.
If I didn't have terrible jokes, I would go crazy from stress from everything going on right now. Especially and I'd like to talk to you about this, John, because you were just in Russia, especially with our government seemingly escalating even more towards a possible nuclear exchange with Russia right now. That's scary. It's a terrifying time to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly, incredibly terrifying. That's the right word. And we're seeing just a historic level of irresponsibility coming from the Biden administration. This is the Biden administration really trying to strengthen the algorithm toward war before the Trump administration gets into office. And of course, the Trump administration itself is full of complexities, full of contradictions. There are people that he wants to appoint who have been outspoken against the war. You think of people like, at least the war in Russia. You think of people like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK have been very critical of U.S. support to Ukraine. But then at the same time, he's appointing these neocon war hawks, people like Marco Rubio, who's never met a war he didn't like, as well as a number of others to critical positions for national security and military, who have always consistently been in the corner of U.S. intervention, U.S. imperialism. And, there's people that he's about to appoint who have actually been critical of the Biden administration for not doing enough or not being strong enough with Russia, calling for more sanctions, for more weapons into Ukraine. So it's
more Nazi collaboration.
Exactly. So it's a very interesting picture. And I think that the Biden administration, the people in the so-called deep state, our military industrial complex, intelligence agencies are really trying to kind of put us on the path that is irreversible, heighten the conflict so much so that the war will continue. And it's just been a tragedy all the way around because, we've seen with these latest Russian missile strikes, the capacity that Russia has to inflict serious damage, not only on Ukraine, but the rest of Western Europe and the United States itself. If we're angling for nuclear war, this is going to be devastating for everyone. It's mutually assured destruction. And I think that what the West still doesn't understand is that Russia is going to defend its key interests. They've been trying to signal to the West for years, since the start of the special military operation, and even before that. Look, we're serious. We're going to take our national sovereignty seriously. We're going to take our national security seriously. And I think that Putin has always kind of had a cool and level hand when it comes to climbing the escalation ladder, instead of resorting to the most maximum kind of impact that he can have, trying to signal to the West that they are serious. And unfortunately, the West doesn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation and continues this path to escalate war. And I think that in the end, if we get this conventional war that our elites are angling for, it's only going to come to the detriment of the U.S. working class and the working classes in Europe, because quite frankly, they're not prepared for war. We're still seeing countries like Germany scramble to prepare logistically in the event of a war. We saw last week Germany come up with this plan, which was very artfully named Operation Plan Germany. I know it's not that clever.
That's like a name I would come up with.
Yeah, exactly.
Noah's show, Noah's plan. It would be.
Did they put Noah in charge of German propaganda? But anyways, this is just a signal that one, they're behind logistically in preparing for the war, but they are trying to kind of catch their economies up and prepare their economy for wartime, which Russia has been doing for the last several years now.
And so you know what's crazy? Like, if I were in charge of German propaganda, right? One, I would be frothing at the mouth in every single media outlet I had a contact in. After Biden blew up Nord Stream, I would be immediately on Russia's side. Immediately. The U.S. literally targeted a multi-billion-dollar piece of German infrastructure just to screw them up, right? Because they were getting cheap energy from Russia. And it blows my mind that Germany, rather than deal with the actual threat here, which is our ruling class, is just like, yeah, of course the U.S. is right. We'll side with these Nazis. I mean, they do have a thing about Nazi invasions and war, but whatever. It's striking to me that they choose the side they do, and it makes me question well, I know why. It's the whole euro and dollar system and blah blah blah, but it makes me question how low the EU is going to go in service of this dying empire. Really, what do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, no, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I look at it through the lens of multipolarity, and I look at it through the lens of the East rising, the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and all these other alternatives to the dollar system, to the U.S. dollar hegemony. But yeah, it really looks like Germany and the Eurozone, they're going to go down with the ship. They just, they really need a working class proletarian movement to overcome this. There's really no other way. And without the ACP in the American context, I don't know where I would be personally. I've been doing organizing for close to a decade now, and there hasn't really been an organization that has a program that actually makes sense for the first time that actually exists. So we really hope that our brothers and sisters in Europe can sort of also get their stuff together, because we all need to work together. We need to work together with Russia and China and Iran and all these countries, because otherwise it's just going to be a disaster. There's no other way. That's just what imperialism does. Imperialism just leads to decay and to destruction. So
and
I don't
war
know.
and reproletarianization and
Exactly.
all this gross stuff. And I don't know. I feel like, well, let's stay on the topic of the ACP because it's kind of a brighter topic. I don't know if you guys have been living in like some sort of libertarian like commune where you're trying to live off the land and all that stuff. But Drake, famous rapper Drake, donated to our chairman's live stream recently, and He's welcome to come on this show if he wants. I'm just saying. No, he's not one of the super secret guests. Sorry, but that's pretty cool.
That was real, by the way. You know, we got Tom Piker was on Twitch today saying, "No, that's not real." It was real. You know, I'm not sure how intentional, but it was definitely real. And look, you know, this is part of our strengths. So we play to our strengths. We are good at taking real information and sharing it widely, and being part of the zeitgeist. You know, this is really kind of the strength of the ACP. You know, we are like, we don't have big funders. We don't have a long institutional legacy. You know, we're only a few months old, but the kind of firestorm that we've been able to create online, and then just the overall recognition that we have in these, you know, leftist communities online and on social media is really profound. And a lot of it's tied to, I think, the material work that we're actually doing on the ground that lends us legitimacy and credibility. And so I don't want to understate that component of it. But it's like, it's so funny to see. And then, you know, the people who criticize us actually do us a lot of favors, because it's like we've seen throughout history. You know, it's like we saw kind of with the Stalinist period, where we get these left and right deviators who are having these criticisms of us that are mutually exclusive. And within that, we're kind of finding our own golden American Marxist center. So I think it's been a very interesting phenomenon. But yeah, you know, we're gonna use social media and all of the cultural figures in the zeitgeist to our advantage. That's what a good communist movement should do, and that's what intelligent Marxists need to aim for.
100%, brother. Look, we're gonna get into the show. We got a bunch of good calls lined up for you tonight. I want to say one more thing on this. Even the people who hate us can't stop talking about us, can't stop thinking about us. We are everywhere, and we ain't going nowhere. Before we get to the show, though, I want to say thank you, David, one of the OGs of the Institute, for the $5 super sticker, and Poper's another one who says, currently at the start of unionizing my work. Hell yeah, brother. So far, I have about 40% of my shop on board. Do you have any advice / strategies that may help? Yes, but that is a long conversation that we can have offline. Send me a message on Telegram and we'll go over it. We'll get you in contact with whoever you need to in your area, and we'll get it done for you, brother. I promise you we can help. But yeah, let's just get into it right now. All right, I got to share my screen. I'm apparently not quick enough to do that. So give me a second, guys. I'm sorry. I'm an old man, and computers are scary to me, right? There it is. All right, perfect. And we're gonna do that, and I think we're good to go, brother. All right. Usually I have an idea of who the calls are before they come on, but I had a lot going on tonight, so I just ain't got that. Tell us who the first call is, Daniel. And by the way, John's going to stick around and take a few calls with us, so I'm excited about that.
We've got Pavel.
Pavel from Austria. This guy is one of my favorite people. He calls in every week. What's up, Pavel? Pavel, my man, you got to actually talk. It's a talk show. A show where you talk. All right, Pavel can't talk, apparently. Oh, Pavel's gone. Poor Pavel. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe the Austrian government came for him. I don't know. Oh, I got to do one more thing. Hold on, because I had you. Oh, no, we're good. All right, next call. Let's go to it.
We got John on.
John, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Well, I would make a remark about the ceiling, but it just went over my head.
What about the glass ceiling? Since we're dealing with intersectionalism tonight, is the glass ceiling also over your head?
Well, the answer would be really clear. Otherwise, you know what? Hey, John, do you know what shatters when you say it?
What?
Silence. Yeah.
There we go. We got so many dad. He just
Well,
Oh,
Noah invites the
I
dad.
guess if the bourgeoisie are preparing for Thanksgiving, I guess they don't want to stop the gravy train.
hmm Exactly. All right. I gotta do a little shaking and moving here. Hold on. All right. So what do you got for us tonight, John?
All right, my question tonight is actually a bit of history as well as a bit of future speculation. So, what sort of advances in the productive forces tend to work out best for the proletariat in the long term and maybe disrupt the bourgeoisie along the way? And what might be some future ones that would do the same, at least in your opinion?
Man, that's a really deep and good question. Do you want to take a stab at it first, John, or you want me to go?
There was a little bit of feedback. I just adjusted it, so I didn't really catch the full question. So you can either repeat it. I'm happy to take it, or Noah, you can jump in, and I can try and deduce what the question
Oh
was.
yeah, I'll answer and I'll bake the question into it. So the most important advances in the forces of production, and those that are long term beneficial to the proletariat specifically, have been revolutionary developments, right? Those that throw a monkey wrench into the old way of doing things, right? The steam engine, the spinning jenny, the AI and the internet in our era, right? These force changes into society that advance the decay of the old system and force the contradiction to be resolved in a new way, right? The spinning jenny, the steam engine, all these things, the cotton gin, gave way to the 20th century proletarian revolutions, right? After they gave way to the bourgeois revolutions. And so I would say in our era, AI and the internet are doing that same thing. Think about the era of the PMC and the middle classes that we're sort of leaving now, right? As reproletarianization happens. Everyone wanted some creative job, some office job, some thinking job, right? Nowadays with AI, a lot of these jobs can be done through AI quicker, better, and more efficiently than anyone could do, even creative ones. Think about everyone that I went to school with wanted to be a graphic designer. And AI can spit out thousands of images in the time it takes a good graphic designer to do one or two. It's just better. And what it's doing is making the boss worker relationship, it's throwing it into question, right? How that's going to develop and look going on, I don't know. But I think that it forces us to address this and forces us to look at how production happens in a new way. What about you, John? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll start with kind of some of the realities that we're observing. Right, we're seeing these massive tech monopolies really begin to have disproportionate influence over the U.S. economy and also politics. When you look at companies like Amazon or Walmart, and the degree to which we're all kind of commonly linked to relying on these companies to some extent, right? More and more that puts us into a common position, right? We're more and more put into this almost collective organism. Where we're, regardless of what communities, and especially in the United States you live in, you're reliant on the same productive forces to get your basic needs, to get any of your consumer items, and so on. And so, it is putting us largely into a more kind of common state of affairs. I think that it's also accelerating this divide, right? That Marx, once upon a time, predicted is that the ultimate divide would be between two classes, this bourgeois class and the proletariat. And I think that in this current state of modern productive relations, we're seeing that now more than ever. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, it's putting us into kind of a common state of almost this form of neo-feudalism arising, right? Where we're all almost like serfs under these big tech monopolies, these big social media monopolies like Meta and so on. And what I see emerging, to get a little bit more maybe creative here, is that our relations in society have been in the capitalist epoch dictated by wealth, by money. But I think that when Noah's talking about the rise of AI, the rise of all of these different tools that now allow us to maybe have an input into the economy in a creative way, but in a different creative way, we're going to see the rise of language. I think language itself, the way that we communicate with one another, then also just how kind of language interacts at a very fundamental level, where language is going to kind of set the parameters for how society is run, for how our political organizations are structured. And so no longer will we be set in these types of social relations that are predicated on the supremacy of capital, but it will be language that reflects the social relations in society. So, I'm kind of calling back to a book. I'm not sure if you've read it before, Noah, but it's called The Communist Postscript by Boris Groys. Have you had the chance to read this?
I have it. I ordered it because Haas recommended it. I think the first time I actually met him, he recommended it, but I haven't been able to read it yet. I've been so focused, and I actually want to add on to something here. I've been so focused with my own book that all my reading is just research for that. Like if you look at that book back there, that's Capital in the 21st Century by Piketty. Horrible book, horrible liberal, but full of data I need. So anyway, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a great book. There's a lot of food for thought in it, and it kind of imagines the ultimate arrival of what, like Plato imagined, right? The prevalence of philosophers have been imagining this since time immemorial, where it would be philosopher kings who are kind of the ones that are not dictating society, but guiding society, building society on the basis of common sets of ideas around, sociality and human interactions, and that it would be literally philosophy and language itself, which is the guiding principle of how humans organize with each other, how they interact with each other, how our means of production function to serve basic human interests. And I think that the rise of things like AI, all of these new forms of technology really lend themselves to a potential future where we're not bound by these laborious and tedious tasks anymore, but we are unleashed actually to use our minds in the most creative way, even beyond these like graphic designers that Noah was talking about, where the average person is now empowered to bring their ideas to life, right? And whether that's through art, whether that's through coming up with a business, there are tools at our disposal now that really make it possible for an average person to interact with society and produce things in ways that were previously only possible with mass quantities of labor and vast amounts of wealth. And so I think that's what we're seeing.
Absolutely. That reminded me. My son he's 15, by the way, so he obviously knows everything, right? And he was talking to me the other day. He was like, Dad, I really don't like AI. And, he's 15. So, of course, he heard someone say this and gave him a good argument for it. So he took it on board. And so I'm explaining to him, right? Like, he's like, I'm like, okay, so why don't you like AI? He's like, well, think about it. Like, it just copies all of our art and it takes that and puts it into this new stuff. I'm like, well, have you ever thought about it the other way? That it used to be just people who had the free time to spend years learning it that could be creative. Now, anyone can be creative. Anyone can put something into that AI and go from their mind into reality. And
Right.
That is a turning point. And that made him sit back and go, oh, I didn't think about it like that. It actually expands creativity rather than shoves it down, right? Um,
And I think that we should think about, we're talking about the disruptive aspects of these technological changes and innovations. And my mind always, because we're in the realm of politics, you and I spend our time doing politics, current events when we're not working. And the disruptive capacity that these new technologies have in the realm of politics is very profound, right? We think about what the ACP has been able to do and utilizing AI art and some of these tools. I mean, previously, it's only been these massive organizations, NGOs, and super PACs that have been able to put together very polished and refined ads and propaganda. But now we have the capacity to literally do that ourselves, and we're seeing the fruits of that come to bear. I mean, literally with a few dollars, or even with like a $10 subscription, and we're seeing how these are now being squeezed to try to push out the average working person from being able to access these services, as monopolies tend to do. But we've been able to put together things that look like they could have been produced by a massive corporation with very, very limited resources. And that is kind of even the playing field, so to speak, when it comes to politics and political propaganda.
Well, why do you
So
think so many anti-communists like make up these crazy stories about the Communist Party being funded by the CIA and Russia somehow at the same time, and whatever else? It's because what we do looks professional. We have the tools now to make it look professional, whereas 20, 30 years ago they kind of didn't. Sorry to interrupt, John. I had to get that out there.
yeah, absolutely. No, that's right on the money. And it'll be interesting to see how things develop. Like I said, there's other tools that the ruling class has at its disposal to limit the power of these tools for the average American worker and the working class as a whole. So that's the struggle that we find ourselves in now. But it's like with every new repression, some other avenue emerges, right? Whether it's a new website that kind of like prioritizes free speech, that we're able to get these ideas into the zeitgeist. So it's a very, very dynamic situation. And I think now more than ever, the fluidity with which our economy and technology is advancing provides a lot of opportunity. And I think that now the institutions, the political institutions, the institutions of control by the bourgeois class are struggling to catch up with just how to regulate these things to preserve their class power. So I always take the optimistic view that this is kind of a watershed moment for us.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Toothbrush here puts it perfectly. Technology is good. It is, right? I'm very sick of these Luddites that are like talking about how technology is taking away our humanity. No, technology is an expansion of our humanity. But I want to sort of bring it into one more area for you, John, because I think that this rise of technology and AI, the internet, all of this is also a product of financialization, right? And it's a product of financialization at the end of its rope, right? That it's forcing these new things because financialization has become basically a Ponzi scheme. And I've gone over how the financial economy works a dozen times. But if someone has a question, please, by all means, ask and we can go over it again. Because that it's at the end of its rope, and right, it's forcing all of this debt creation. Something needs to give, right? And that something is already within society itself. I know that's like kind of vague, and I don't want to go into a whole huge thing about it because it'll take an hour just to get us to a point of understanding it. Like literally half my book is about this. But yeah, it comes along at the same time, and that's not for no reason. It's not just a coincidence. It's financialization and the fact that production has moved out of the US that makes room for the tech economy to begin.
I want to mention one more. It was another example that just came to mind when you were speaking, but it also opens up avenues for new forms of production domestically. And I'm thinking specifically about like the rise of things like 3D printers. And how these types of tools can produce significant quantities of various materials. Some of them are more kind of industrial based, some of them are more decorative, whatever it may be. But this, these are tools that a single individual or an individual and their apprentice can do by themselves, right? And we interact with people. There's people even within the party that are using some of these tools to produce things that people need for their homes. Things like literally like things like mailbox stands and all of these other items, which it's no longer necessary materially speaking, at least, to go to a big corporation and get something from them. We're seeing this opportunity now emerge for the individual to almost take back their ability to be like a craftsman or a tradesperson, but in the modern future context. And we've seen countries like China and others utilize these tools more effectively to promote small business, to promote the entrepreneurial spirit at the individual and local level. And that's something that I think that we need to keep in mind here, and that we should aim for.
It's also something that the ACP takes very seriously and is doing ourselves. John, I'm sure you could talk to us for hours about 3D printing, couldn't you?
Well, 3D printing is certainly a multi-layered topic.
That John, sorry, yeah, John Caller, John, not John. Yeah.
Well, it's certainly a multi-layered topic. It's because sometimes you use molten plastic, it can be a very hot one as well. A lot of times, among 3D printing enthusiasts, there's intense discussion over the best melting points and such for different plastics. You could say it's a really heated discussion.
This guy's amazing.
I swear, I put him on a 1 pun a night regimen, and I give him an inch and he takes a mile. Thanks very much for your call, John. Always a pleasure talking to you, brother. We'll talk to you next time. Dude, I think John always has a really, really deep question along with the dad jokes and puns, right? And I'm sorry, I'm going to crack up hysterically at everyone. You guys will have to deal with that. But the notion that these technological advances are bad because they're bad for our current system is one that I think gets too much traction. Right. I remember Tucker Carlson famously saying that he would, what was it? He would stall the development of electric cars, or it was
self-driving cars.
Self-driving cars. Right. Exactly. Because it would put so many people out of business, right? Or out of work. But in a socialist society, these people could still work. They would just be working less intensely. Right, they would be there as a safety supervisor or whatever, the button pusher, and I don't know. It's a different framing to think of. Yes, these are the conditions now, but no, it is impossible for them to always be the conditions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, that's exactly. And I remember this post, and I remember thinking the same thing. Your response to that was great. If people want to dig it up, it's definitely worth a read. Because I think there's two aspects to this, right? On the one hand, we do want to be conscientious about how we transform our economy and how our economy adapts with these technological changes so that workers maintain a level of dignity, that they have, the opportunity to retool their skills to fit into the modern economy. That's something that we absolutely do not do now. And there's a bit of a right reaction when it comes to the development of these new technologies, because it is true that when we see things implemented in our economy and in the system that we have currently, it often comes at the expense of workers. So, truck driving, which is one of the biggest, which is one of the most common jobs in the United States. Yeah, if you automate all of that and you don't have an education system, you don't have the types of social programs in place to allow a smooth transition to a new type of economy where self-driving cars and trucks are the norm, then that, of course, this is going to be bad. This is part of the pattern of capitalist exploitation that we see when technology continues to develop. But on the other hand, if you do have a socialist economy in place, if you have a political system that is controlled by the working class, then that creates the conditions for a transition which allows workers to, take a, have jobs and have a level of dignity that they don't have to break their back over. Because, I'm, sure that if you talk to most truck drivers, it's like, it's a taxing job. If you have to drive from one coast to another, I mean, it's a big country. It's not the easiest thing to do. People don't like, driving and pissing in bottles. And that's part of the reality too. So it's like we have to take both things into consideration. But it seems like there's either the left impulse to just deny the well-being or the necessity to address the conditions of the average truck driver, or you have this kind of reactionary tendency just to kind of let's freeze the level of technological development at its current state to preserve the status quo. Neither of which are possible, quite frankly. So that just puts the impetus again on a need for a socialist economy.
And I mean, what is that but a fantastic example of capitalism becoming a fetter on the development of society, right? We can't fully explore this thing that would genuinely make life easier because the contradictions already present within our society won't allow it. It would have a negative consequence. I want to ask I'm sorry, the chat sometimes goes right by me, but I did make sure I pointed out a couple people had questions I wanted to answer. Savita G says regarding the ACP rather than AMC, how to join the New Jersey chapter. It says Telegram, but then gives an error code if I click on the button. You have to be logged in order to do it with your actual username. You have to have a username. If it's still giving you trouble after that, contact us on our Discord and we'll contact the party's tech team and we'll get you signed up. The next one, Scott says, as an editor, what's your views on generative AI as it relates to the creative industries? And I think that's a really, really, really good question, because this is where what my son was talking about, right? I think it allows people to be more creative. I really do. Now, regarding editing work, what I edit is he clarified that he's like in like film in some way, right? But I edit, text. So for me, I don't really trust it yet. I think AI is very good at knowing grammar and proper punctuation and word use and stuff like that. But readability is something ingrained in humanity that I don't think AI is advanced enough to get yet. It doesn't understand what resonates well. And a lot of what it like sort of dumps out at you comes off kind of feeling plastic or canned. That's just my opinion on it. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think we've covered some of it already. I don't have a moral judgment on generative AI. I think that what we've seen with generative AI is there are many people in the creative industries who are worried about the impact that it will have on their career prospects, on their ability to contribute and be able to monetize their contribution to art and media and so on. But again, I think this is an example of where the impetus falls on us to create a socialist economy, because it's true. Like we really are becoming this like neo-feudal type of economy where, like I said, people are now empowered. People without an art degree like myself can make pretty good AI art just with a few inputs and knowing the basics of how to use the tools that rival the things that are created by people who actually study art for a long period of time. Now, this I don't think is a bad thing. The bad part of it is that if you have an industry that's totally monopolized by a few large companies, and then you have for example, X is probably a good example, right, where we can now generate all these types of AI art, but people like me and Noah, we have pretty big audiences when it comes to the people who interact with the things that we create. Now, are we being compensated fairly at all for this output, the creative products that we're producing? Of course not. We're being squeezed further and further, and this is true for everyone on these platforms. They're being squeezed further and further under these neo-feudal conditions. So the rise of generative AI has not had the positive effect on the artistic, the latent artistic capacities of the people. and it's also stoked this anger and resentment towards people who spend their whole careers in these fields. But like I said, I think that in the context of a socialist economy and under the context of a political system that's controlled by the working class, these things could be shaped in order to benefit the average person and unleash the creative potential of your average working American.
I could not have said that better myself. All right, let's move it along. Who's our next caller, Daniel?
Hey, we've got Pavel from Austria back.
Oh, good. Can he actually speak this time?
Yeah, I hear you.
Fantastic. What's up, Pavel? Pleasure to speak with you again, brother.
Nice. Currently, I'm still not under a nuclear cloud, so my organs are not shutting down one by one. My skin is not peeling away yet.
That's good. Not having your organs shutting down is always better than having them shut down, from what I hear. I don't know.
Yeah, just a small comment on John's intro in regards to Europe. I can tell you right now that in at least Germany, you will have a massive right-wing shift, because like the current right-wing party you have there has the correct way to communicate, which is already bad enough. But they sound actually, with the morons currently in charge, much better than the CIA neoliberal woke bloc you have currently in charge and rushing towards nuclear annihilation. So they are making the correct messaging on energy. They are addressing like all this culture war bullshit. And however, they are also, like the Republicans in America, cracking down on immigration to the point of depatriation, which is getting massive traction. So I think what you will see in Germany, you will have, if we survive this, a massive shift towards the right wing, but I do not see them delivering anything in the long term. And then people will have to start to think outside of the system. It's a similar dynamic like in the US. Basically, people voted for Trump because he was marginally better on his communications, but in the end, he will not deliver shit.
I mean,
yeah, you will have a right. You will have a right-wing shift in Germany.
I keep thinking you're done. I apologize, brother. You're right about Trump. Look, there's one main reason that Trump got elected here, and it's that people are so sick of having all these polished lies that we all know are lies coming at them from politicians, and Trump didn't sound like that. That's the major reason.
I agree with you.
Regarding the problems of the shift to the right, I think over there you seem to be having a similar problem to what we had in the pre-2020s, right? The 2000s through 2010s it's basically the fault of the left. It's up to the left to put forward a real sort of movement that can bring people in. But what I see there are people like Die Linke, right? That alienate people. That
you can forget Die Linke.
Well, exactly. Well, like they sort of alienate people. They tell regular people they're terrible and want nothing to do with them, and then they sit around wondering why they lose over and over and over again. And it took the American left a long time to sort of come up with an American Communist Party, right?
I agree with you. I think it has to be part of the learning process, because social democracy and in the framework of imperialism worked quite long in Europe. And that's why people are still believing in the system, despite being it obvious that it's failing everywhere. And they are not linking it to imperialism. That's a whole problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the issues, but I will not expand upon it further. I have one question, or specifically maybe to you, John, how to address this. Because if I speak with people about socialism and communism, they are basically immediately shutting down, basically telling me how bad the, let's say, German Democratic Republic, for example, was, like the old communist East Bloc of Germany prior to the reunification, which sadly occurred. I mean, they cannot shit on it as part of the social systems. Like you had guaranteed work, you had guaranteed housing, you had, let's say, accessible food, accessible and cheap food. So basic needs were met. But basically, what they usually come up with is, yeah, why were the people shot basically at the wall, for example, or why was it necessary by the Stasi to basically spy on people. So yeah, these like the typical questions which basically are thrown in my way when I try to describe, let's say, how broken the current system is, and that, for example, in the German Democratic Republic, you did not have the existential questions like worrying for a job, worrying for having a roof over your head, or worrying that you will be price gouged when it comes to food, which they cannot argue with, funnily enough. But it always comes back basically to this historic context of people getting shot when they were fleeing from Eastern Germany to Western Germany, for example.
Well, my first question for you is: do you live in the eastern or western part of Germany now, and where do you mostly hear these?
I grew up in Western Germany. I have anti-communist parents, and I'm currently living in Austria because due to the fact that I could not find a job in Germany, I'm living now for 4 years in Austria, which were frankly 4 amazing years. As I got to know my wife also here, and Austrian nature is quite beautiful.
It is. I've had the pleasure of traveling there once, and congratulations! It is a beautiful country, and with your wife, that's great. You know what I'll say is that it's very interesting when we look at countries like Germany. There's so many parallels between Germany, France, the United States, and it all kind of follows a similar pattern. What I find really interesting about Germany is how strong the AfD is in the former German Democratic Republic, right? In Eastern Germany. That's where we're really seeing the strong AfD presence, where we see these social democrats and liberals really strong in the Western part, where you have more of the kind of PMC culture, more cosmopolitan, and it's really been in a similar way that the deindustrialization has impacted the Midwest. The monopolization of agriculture in the United States has just decimated rural communities. I think you're seeing a lot of the similar patterns emerge in Germany. And you're seeing a similar political response to that, where there is this kind of resurgence of like the right, or like a populist right, especially in the case of the AfD. And I think that, yeah, like Noah said, I think that this is part of the historical process of the defeat of communism, the ideological supremacy of neoliberalism and liberal capitalism, still having a grip over these European countries. And so this populist movement has had to find itself within that context. Now, I don't think that this is a foregone conclusion that it will always be this way. And I think that it really falls on the patriots and the people of those respective countries and nations to take responsibility and call out the problems, the real, fundamental problems that are impacting society. So in things like the AfD, I'm not totally pessimistic, because I see the kernels of truth that there are
kernels of truth. There are kernels of truth in it. So I would not describe all the people in the AfD as Nazis. This would be absolutely and completely over the top. But there are those elements in it. There are literally people on, let's say, state leadership level, not on federal level, but at least on state leadership level, who basically make excuses on a certain Austrian painter.
I know
so those elements are there.
Look, I want to. It's a tough position you're in, because I'm not Actually, John would know more about Germany than I would. But let me say this, and this is how I approach most people who think they have a negative view of communism. I ask them if they trust the media. Overwhelmingly, they say no. And so I say, why do you trust them about this one subject then? Right? So we can look into a problem together. Now, you look into things like the Berlin Wall. What did they actually call the Berlin Wall in the GDR? They called it the anti-fascism wall. Why? Because who was across the other side of that wall? Who was running West Germany? Literal Nazis. And so protecting people from Nazis, that's worth a wall, in my opinion. Now, talking about shooting people as they try to jump over the wall is like saying they were escaping when you can look up the GDR's constitution and read it yourself. This wasn't illegal for people to go to the other side, right? Germany at the time, though, was the heart of espionage in the entire world, right? Berlin specifically was like spy central. And yes, spies got shot often, right? And there was a constant back and forth, just all like between the communists and the Nazis and liberals all over the place. Daniel, can you walk him through it? You see the private chat, right? Okay, awesome. Daniel's got you covered, brother. We got our next super secret guest coming on, so I think he already spoiled the surprise, but that's okay. But so the rhetoric war, the economic warfare, the actual spy games, all that kind of stuff, all goes in and interrelates to each other. And what the U.S. and the Nazis in West Germany were trying to do specifically was called a brain drain, right? They were literally going into the East and taking educated working class people and bringing them across to the West to work, specifically offering them way more money until they got them living there, right? And then they would go down and down in order to sort of have a propaganda win. And that's the framing that all of that silly stuff about like the wall and all that comes out of. So you got to actually take each thing as it comes and look into it. And unfortunately, I know mostly about the Soviet Union, that's sort of, and American history. Those are my areas of expertise. But Germany, I'm sure you can go into stuff just the same way I have for that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we want to go back.
Go ahead, Pablo.
Yeah, for me, all good points. I mean, yeah, I mean, it looks currently very dire in Europe, but I do think that
you are an eternal pessimist, my friend, and you are talking to like the most optimistic guy you'll ever meet. I am never going to let you get away with pessimism. Look,
I'm a cynic. I expect the worst, so I cannot. So I can be positively surprised if it's actually better.
Tell you what, if you were to look at America 10 years ago, would you think ACP was possible? No, you wouldn't, right?
No,
but here we are.
Not,
no. There are weeks where decades happen, brother, and decades that seem to take weeks, right? And yeah, of course, John. All right, we're gonna bring on. It looks like he's having trouble figuring out how we do all this. Tell you what, next super secret guest, go into the waiting room with Daniel and he'll explain exactly what to do. So click the waiting room thing and he'll explain how to set it up and then we'll get you in. What's your take internationally as far, because we were talking about Germany earlier, John. What do you think their sort of progressive forces look like going forward?
Well, I think it's going to follow a similar pattern that we've seen here in the United States. And unfortunately, we have to kind of muddle through this period where the conservative elements of society kind of inhabit this position of the opposition, because social democracy has been, or this kind of neoliberal world order has been so firmly in control, both in the United States and in Europe. And so while the contradictions are very apparent when it comes to these, middle mainstream lefty parties are very clear. You look at things like the Greens, and at the same time, you see how clearly they're hypocritical about things like the Nord Stream pipeline, right? Which was one of the biggest ecological disasters in the history of the world. It's like the largest methane leak ever in history. But are they the ones who are critical of this provocation with Russia? Well, not so much. Are they the ones who are really talking about and giving a strong voice to the need to resolve the deindustrialization of Germany, East Germany, like I was talking about, with a need to address even just, not from a place of xenophobia, but address immigration and how to manage that effectively. They're not doing those things. So the right is able to inhabit these spaces and present themselves as an opposition. And as we've seen with Donald Trump in his forthcoming administration, which will almost certainly be inhabited by neoconservatives, the same types of war hawks and imperialists.
Little Marco.
Little Marco and all of the others. It'll be very critical for organizations like ours to be able to call out the hypocrisy when they inevitably fail to do things like end the wars or reverse inflation or the dire economic conditions that the American population is in. And I think that, unfortunately, I think that a lot of these European countries, whether we're talking about France or Germany, still have a ways to go. But the seeds of revolutionary potential are there, right? We're seeing that in AfD. We're seeing that in France with the emergence of what's described as the far left or the far right, which have a kind of a similar material critique of the evolution of French society. But one of the problems, I think, is that what we really need to focus on, which what we've set out to do with the ACP, is that there's been this divide, especially in Western countries, between the people who use like the symbols of communism and the working class movement and the actual like essence of a communist movement. And so that this results in, parties like Die Linke in Germany using these symbols of communism and working class struggle while they speak almost exclusively to the university educated woke left that inhabits these major metropolitan areas and big cities. But it's critical for us to be able to bring back these symbols of working class struggle and working class movement into the actual material basis for that movement. So I think that is like one of the next very important steps for the West collectively. Is
100%, brother.
Yeah, for the working class movement to take back these symbols and actually orient the seeds of revolution that find themselves in the rural parts of Germany or France, farming communities, in deindustrialized zones where people are really struggling, and blend this back together into a kind of a cohesive working class movement. And then I don't want to like shut out, the radicals and people in universities completely, because there always have been elements of the genuinely progressive intellectual class that is allied with the peasantry and the working class. And so these all need to be kind of funneled together in one broad working class movement that is against imperialism, against capitalism.
That's the project. That's the goal. That's what we're doing. We're coming at, and I say this all the time. The pre-2020s, like I look at 2020 specifically as a turning point, right? And it begins really in 2016, but 2020 is when something begins happening. Something real begins happening, because for decades before that, we were in a very dark period of falsification of Marxism, right? There's a multi-billion-dollar project to create a compatible left that can use these words and this language and present itself as a left wing, as revolutionary, etc. But in substance, it's precisely what I was talking about in my gears grinding thing at the beginning of the show, right? What?
Intersectionality, right?
Exactly. It's a big red light, right? but in substance, it's reactionary. It's trying to push us backwards in history because in 2020, this new communist movement that becomes vital as time goes on begins growing, right? And it's not just the ACP, right? We're part of it, and I'm very proud of our part of it. But there's other organizations and people that are sort of part of this new sort of taking our first steps in a really genuinely progressive direction for the first time. Our next super secret guest just totally dipped out on us. I don't know what happened to him. Daniel, was he just unable to get the technology going?
Yeah, I think he might have been on his phone, but I think he needs to be on his computer to get properly set up. But no, it's a terrific point, and I wanted to say a couple of things about intersectionality because we hear this. Oh well, you guys you can't be class reductionists, right? We've heard that, and we've had this years-long debate about so-called class reductionism, and I think that a lot of it, a lot of this needs to be explained in its proper historical context, right? Mm-hmm. In the 1920s, when you saw the rise of the CPUSA, right, for the first time, it was founded in 1918 or 1919. You can correct me. One of those.
1919. Yeah.
1919, and William Z. Foster, and the work that all of these people did to demonstrate that, we shouldn't have these kinds of pan-left movements that divide us on the basis of race or ethnicity or religion. And they saw this amazing success, for example, in being able to unite the white workers with the black workers in these meatpacking industries. And actually, it gave their strikes a level of militancy and power that had not been seen before. And so in this period where the American communist movement was the strongest, from the 1920s to around the 1960s, we saw a rapid advance in the conditions of working people, because we had this edge to us. The left in the United States, at least a portion of it, understood clearly the significance of Marxism-Leninism and abided, it conducted its movement along those lines. And then, in the 70s and 80s, we saw this infiltration, really, of the left by these forces, NGOs, elite universities that tried to push this notion of, it wasn't called intersectionality at the time, but this pan-leftism that ultimately became the new left, which focused, on identity and putting us into these various buckets. But I always go back to the metaphor of the tree, right? And by the way, we saw just the fruits of this ideology over the course of the last 40 years, as the capitalist class has reversed many of the social programs and rights that we've become accustomed to, and as the conditions of the average working person have deteriorated. I mean, what has this new left got? What has this new left achieved for us? I mean, the proof is in the pudding there. But I go back to the metaphor of the tree on this notion of class reductionism, because we always have to retort that, it's not class versus race or class versus gender. Class is the totality of human struggles throughout history. And each of these particular struggles, whether it's, kind of on the basis of race or ethnicity, is taking place within the context of a broader class struggle. You could even think about something like slavery, right? Where, of course, we saw the institution of African slavery in the Atlantic slave trade that was directed at Africans who were dispossessed from their homelands, and they were alienated. A lot of them were brought from different countries, thrown into this country, completely isolated, completely alienated, completely uprooted from any community that would give them the basis to actually advocate for their rights. And so, the imperialists at the point of a gun, because of, relatively somewhat de minimis advantages that the Europeans had that actually came to have a real effect in things like gunpowder and ships and so on, were able to exploit this continent and use this vast population for the accumulation of wealth for the planter class, which continues for hundreds of years. But it wasn't that race had this special, metaphysical significance that allowed the capitalists to take, advantage of Black people, for example, in this country. But it was based on the actual historical circumstances that allowed a form of class domination on the part of our capitalist class to exploit slave labor. And they didn't have that same, to the same extent. There were forms of slavery and indentured servitude that happened to other populations and other ethnicities, including European ones. in the history of this country that shouldn't just be papered over. But at the same time, for many of the white communities or European communities in the United States, there was a basis of community connectivity that didn't allow them to be exploited in the same way that the African slaves who were brought to this country were exploited by the planter class of the South. So again, this is another example of class struggle. This is class struggle. And to go back to the metaphor of the tree, it's like you have these liberals from their ivory towers that are trying to tell us, oh, you keep talking about the tree, but talk about what about the branch? What about the leaves? What about the roots? The roots need, but yes, we're saying the whole thing is the tree, right? We have to give attention to the tree. We have to grow the tree, right? And if we fixate on one of these categories to the detriment of another, it creates these false divisions in society that we have seen really play a noxious and parasitic role in being able to unify the class struggle to grow the collective tree, which is the working class, the proletariat of the United States, in a real meaningful way. So that's what we're saying. It's not class or, it's class is. And each of these particular struggles fall within the context of the class struggle.
100%. Look, I say this all the time, that the Black freedom movement, right, is the primary historically determined form of the class struggle in American history, especially at its most revolutionary moments after 1776, right? The second revolution is led by the enslaved Black proletariat, who is a specifically historically determined sort of form of surplus value creation, right? That's what they're there for. They're not like Greek slaves in the Greek Empire or Roman slaves, right? It's a bourgeois form of slavery. And they're there creating surplus value for capitalists. Now, these planters, they oh my God, I just blanked on what I was saying. I'm sorry. So if this is what they're doing, right? How is their struggle for liberation, for freedom from chains, not a historically determined form of the class struggle? It is. It's a struggle of a particular part of the working class, right, against a particular part of the ruling class. And it results in the first ever dictatorship of the proletariat in all of history, right, in Reconstruction in the South. W.E.B. Du Bois goes into this in Black Reconstruction in America, but we're finally going to get to our second super secret surprise guest, who is right here. There we go. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Peace. Yeah, I never entered through Discord, so that was an adventure. Yeah, great topic. Good to see John here, and yeah, when I first came on, I was blogging John, so thanks to Daniel for helping us figure this out. Good to see everybody. I'll just stay a few minutes, Noah, but I wanted to say what's up.
Definitely. Danny's even worse at technology than I am, by the way. Danny actually, man, they just keep coming.
What up, boys?
We don't have like a 4-person thing, Eddie. Can you make one?
It's only letting 3 people in?
No. Like John's still here, but we can only show 3 at a time. I don't see like a 4-person. There it is.
Go.
Yeah, I'm a genius.
Hey,
what up, everybody?
Let's go. It's a party.
What's up?
It's a party.
Noah's show is party night tonight, I guess.
I love it. What's been going on?
We're talking about intersectionality.
Oh, nice.
Eddie's favorite topic.
It is, yes. As a cis man, you guys don't understand the oppression I face.
Yo, you know what I was gonna say? No, we should do the privilege walk.
We've got enough people for it.
I was.
Does anyone listening not know what the privilege walk is? Describe what it is for us, Danny. It's really funny. They make you do this in like DEI trainings in colleges and stuff. Legit, it's a real thing.
Yeah, a year ago we interviewed last October 2023 Christian Parenti, my former colleague at John Jay College, and he had written an article about the privilege walk. And the privilege walk is picture us four faces on the screen, shoulder to shoulder in a gym, in a gymnasium, in an empty basketball court. And the facilitator, this is one of them classic nonprofit unpacking the knapsack of privilege activities, Peggy, Macintosh, etc. The facilitator says, if you're cisgendered, take 2 steps forward. If you identify as LGBTQ S2 plus, take 3 steps back. And it keeps going on and on and on. Of course, with the privilege walk or the power shuffle, I remember playing this when I was a teenager, and instinctively I was like, wait a minute, something's off. And it's because they never asked one question that had to do with class. So then I remixed it, and I was like, if you've been locked up before, 3 steps back. If you didn't grow up with your father, I just started asking class questions, and then things started to work out very differently, and we saw what we had in common instead of dividing people. And Christian Parenti writes a lot about exploitation versus oppression and getting caught up in these oppression Olympics and how that's ruling class liberal ideology.
In that interview, Christian said something, and he was a great guy, by the way. I really liked him. He was super nice. One of the things he said that stuck with me is the way poverty is discussed in America is not it's not. I'm getting an echo through someone's speakers. Someone might have the speakers too close to their mic. Anyway, the way poverty is discussed in America is not exactly the way that it should be, right? It's all sort of. It is you, Eddie. It looks like you. Oh no, it's not. Okay.
No, I muted myself and it was still going.
Oh, okay. It's probably Danny then, because me and John have been on all night. Anyway, the way that poverty is discussed is that it's done in comparisons. This community is more impoverished than that community. And they do all these comparisons. You look up poverty on the internet, and that's what you find. You see all kinds of people comparing different communities and poverty. But it never talks about poverty as such. Who are the impoverished? Who are the working class? Who are the ones living paycheck to paycheck? Because here's the fact. Forbes reported this last year. 78% of Americans, period, not in one community or another, are living paycheck to paycheck. That's across communities. But if you Google this, you don't get that info. You get the comparisons. And that's done on purpose because we're set against each other. What things like the privilege walk do is looks at people the way intersectionality does, the way I was complaining about at the intro, right? It says, oh, you got it better than you, so you must be oppressing you, right? But really, we're all getting screwed, and the guy to blame is up there. He ain't over here, right? I don't know. That's just me.
No, and it's like, imagine if you're, a working class person who works 40 to 60 hours a week with your hands, somebody like Noah. And then, they line you up next to some college student. And because of, Noah's skin color, the fact that he's straight or whatever, they're saying that he's, much more privileged than this college student who works, under 20 hours a week just going to class or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying college is easy, but it's kind of like a 4-year vacation. Not going to lie, as someone who's been through it. It's not the hardest thing in the world compared to working concrete or working as a carpenter. And, it's completely ridiculous. You could get a professional managerial class person who's, considered more oppressed than a working class person because of, these various factors, which, I'm not saying, I mean, there is a tendency of the police in this country to shoot black people more than white people, right? There's a racist tendency in the police, and there's historical reasons for that. But you know what else? You know what's a much stronger corollary between your likelihood of getting shot by police than your skin color? Your class. A poor white person is far more likely statistically to get shot by the police than a wealthy black person. Right. So there is that racist element there, and it's good to acknowledge that. But socialism is the only solution to that. But if we divide it up by race, then white people and black people don't realize that the state, the capitalist state, and the armed bodies of the state, like the police, are our common enemy, right? They try and say this is only the enemy of black people. It's not. If you're a white person, the police are still giving you stupid tickets to hit their quotas every month, skimming a little extra cream out the top of the working class. They're still more likely to, pull out their gun and get violent if you're a poor person, if you're not dressed in a suit or whatever. So yeah, it just what intersectionality does, it removes the primacy of class, which is anti-Marxist. There's a reason, class is centered in all our analysis, because in class society, it is the biggest divider. And the statistics show this out, right? We're materialists. If the statistics didn't show this out, if the statistics showed that cops were more likely to shoot rich black people versus poor white people, then we would have to rethink things. But that's not the case. And what the intersectional theorists refuse to acknowledge these critiques.
Yeah, and Noah said it earlier, but there's a reason why all of our corporate boardrooms are pushing things like intersectionality, but never mentioning class, right? And I think that fundamentally it has to do with they want a working class that doesn't have militancy, right? They want a working class that is divided, that is more focused on using their emotional energy fighting each other than actually turning their attention to the bosses, to these corporate boardrooms themselves. And we've been inculcated with this idea that if we're simply, nice to each other, let people speak based on some identity characteristic, that this will be what solves the social issues that are plaguing America. But again, it's a misdirection, because they don't want us focused on the common grievances that we have that are based on the fact that our wages, for example, aren't keeping up with how vastly more productive our economy has become over the course of the last 50, 60 years. And so, I think about, my professional experience and stuff all the time, where you'll have these highly powered, like elites, like CEOs and directors of big corporations come in and tell us about the need to have diversity, equity, inclusion, or the need to talk about intersectionality. And they will hire entire administrative staff in order to kind of promote these ideas, which there's an irony here, because again, it's this ballooning of this vast administration in corporate America that is sucking up a lot of the wealth of the American working class and then just redistributing it upwards. So it's a bit ironic that literally this tool, this idea of intersectionality, is literally being used by the ruling class, by the big bourgeoisie, meaning the corporate monopolies and our large financial institutions, as a way, literally, both in terms of using it as a blanket and as a cover to distract us from class analysis, and then literally as an actual tool from which they are trying to solicit more investments and build up this vast labyrinth of corporate administration, instead of actually investing in the things that are productive for society, that are producing, the goods and services that we actually need.
Let me just break in real quick. Yo, this is a call-in show. If you want to try to debate that Marxism is a degenerate philosophy, you're free to do so. Tell you what, you'll only even have to talk to me. If you can actually make the case that it is a degenerate philosophy and you're actually talking about Marxism, not only will I give you $50 of my own money, I will literally attempt to eat my shoe live on stream so you can laugh. But let's be real. You're lying and you have no idea what Marxism is. So leave the talking about Marxism to those of us who know about it, unless you want to get in the live chat and try to make your case.
Can I say something in response to what John said? Because, I mean, it's good to go to the concrete, I think, and give a practical example of how this plays out. And, this doesn't get to everything that John was saying, but one of my buddies who works on the railroad here in the U.S. He's a union rail guy. His coworker got suspended without pay by one of these corporate HR departments who work for the wealthiest, most corrupt rail shareholders in the world. These giant, rail cartels that have a complete monopoly and treat their workers like dirt and allow, American infrastructure to crumble in an embarrassing way and in a dangerous way. They have these HR departments that suspended one of his coworkers without pay for calling someone a cocksucker because that was homophobic, right? So this is intersectionality applied in a capitalist society. It becomes, just nitpicking and nagging the working class over things that are, you really think that guy was thinking, I hate gay people when he was calling his coworker a cocksucker? Are you kidding me? Right. But this is what happens when you remove the primacy of class. You allow, you end up rooting for a corporate HR department to crack down on a working class person who's in one of the most exploitative industries in the country. It's like, no, as Marxists, it's our job to fight for those working people, not side with the corporate HR departments that's sucking more money out of them and suspending them without pay and allowing, rail derailments to go on every year.
Yeah, exactly, Eddie. And it's like, people will call us out for like neglecting like the ideological superstructures of racism, whatever. I would point them to like read our party constitution, where we, explicitly denounce any forms of racism, bigotry, sexism, and so on. So, we do address these things. But again, it's about centering the primacy of class, as you mentioned, and that in order to actually change these ideological, reactionary superstructures that are present within capitalism and then their mirror, we have to establish a government of, by, and for the working class. And without that, we're only going to inflame the contradictions further, because why has the right been so successful? Why is this kind of reactionary, oh, let's just go to the past, let's just do the Stepford wife thing, and the actual sexism, the actual anti-Semitism, the actual racism, which is becoming prevalent again. Why is this gaining steam? Well, it's because a lot of just regular American people just intuitively see the bullshit that is being pushed by these elite institutions and then reacting to that. So we're actually trying to solve the problem of racism. We're actually trying to solve the problem of sexism at its roots, but we're not getting caught up in these ideological superstructures without addressing the base conditions.
Couldn't
Absolutely.
have said it better myself, brother.
That's so true.
Look, it's a new world as of the 2020s. People are sick. And here's the thing. What you touch on something important, John. What these liberals and anti-communists who call themselves communists do is create a self-fulfilling prophecy. They are so repulsive, so arrogant and smug, and so condescending to everyone about everything, because they're constantly needing to make themselves morally superior. And there's a whole reason that happens, but we don't have to get into that right now. That they literally push people into the arms of lunatics like Nick Fuentes, right? They start going down that hill because of how annoying these liberals are. And so then they go, oh, everybody's a bigot. Well, you're the one making them bigots. And the reason I say the 2020s are a new era is because there's a real left wing again, right? A left wing that doesn't shout at people for a half hour or lecture them about pronouns and microaggressions. Do you know that someone in the old party leadership scolded me once for using the word scold and told me I was being a misogynist for saying the word scolding?
Wait,
because
skull, like the Vikings chant, skull, like when they do that.
no, like scold, like meh, 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 that kind of scolding. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about it, Danny?
Oh man, clearly I joined the right conversation. I mean, I'm just super grateful that I found Midwestern Marks, because, and I don't even know how y'all put up with me for the initial months, because when you're in this silo of academic thinking, this iron ideological triangle the nonprofits, academia, media, you get stuck. And no matter what I did, I tried to placate the cancelers, the wreckers, this liberal left spectrum of non-communists masquerading as communists. New York City is the epicenter of this stuff. And how interesting that I went back, because I was trying to remember everything that Christian Parenti spoke about last year, and I went back and I watched the entire interview, and I've changed so much in the past year and a half. Here's another example of this lunacy, this ideological alienation that they feed us every day. This is another classic Peggy McIntosh. She was the woman who did all the stuff about the experiment in the class. If you had blue eyes, you were shunned from the class, and it was supposed to be so you could relate to how Black people feel. So she has this whole kind of privilege worksheet here.
That's what. Let me hold on a second, Danny. She had instructed kids to shun people with blue eyes so they would understand how Black people feel.
Exactly. It's
Wow.
very famous. I mean, this has millions and
That's-
millions and millions of views.
Holy shit.
So she comes into the class. We should break it down one day and put it on. But
Yeah.
she basically tells, half the class, because you have blue eyes, you're nothing. And then she acts like the prototypical racist teacher in Alabama in the 1871 or whatever, or after Reconstruction. And she says, "You have blue eyes, you're worthless." And some of the students start crying because some don't know what's going on. But what I brought up here, so this is this is called the invisible knapsack of privilege. And this is supposed to show that how us white people, not sure if there's any white people in the house tonight, but you read through these 50 things, right? I can swear or dress in secondhand clothes or not answer letters without having people attribute these choices to the bad morals, the poverty, or the illiteracy of my race. I can speak in public to a powerful male group without putting my race on trial. I mean, you all get the point, right? And like Eddie was saying, of course there's racism, of course there's white supremacy, of course there's police brutality, of course there's segregation. We fight against all these things. But this privilege check sheet, which they use at Harvard and Wellesley and all the elite, universities, not one of the things works on bringing white and Black people together, or people of color and white people together. It's all designed to frame white people as the oppressor, everyone else is oppressed. So there's no equal basis for organizing, the very point that you all are making, and how important to organize along lines of exploitation, because we all have the same exploiters, the bosses, the supervisors, the bourgeoisie, the ruling class. You'll never hear this vocabulary coming out of all these Ivy League, elite universities. And that's by design. And New York City is the epicenter of this trash. I lost track of how many times they canceled me from these different groups. It's embarrassing.
I just want to say too, to make Danny feel a little better. I was in a similar spot. Like my friend reminded me, I had forgotten about this, but I did one video apologizing for weaponizing my whiteness on TikTok, and another video. This one's worse. I did another video apologizing for being fat phobic, because I made a video where I said sugar was unhealthy, and I was accused of fat phobia by about 17 400-pound TikTokers. And I was basically bullied by middle-class TikTok creators who, the thing was, they weren't just in my comments. I knew these people personally. I had them on Snapchat, and they were messaging me on Snapchat telling me I needed to make an apology video because I said sugar is bad for you. And I did. I caved to the pressure. And at the time, I was scared to lose followers. I was scared to lose my account. I was really, like, they call us grifters now. But, the closest I ever was to grifting was back then. I was still doing good content. But, like, I was so terrified of being canceled by these libs. And what I learned eventually was that they were going to hate me regardless. They just didn't like the fact that I was getting popular. They didn't like the fact that I was a masculine cis white person spreading Marxism, Leninism. And I do think, we need a diverse array of voices. Malumbo, my good buddy, Congolese American, recently joined the party, and I think that's huge because I understand why, Black Americans wouldn't want to trust a bunch of white faces given the history of racial oppression in this country. Like, I get it to some degree, but it's like, you realize at some point when you're in these leftist echo chambers, like, these people are never going to accept you. They're the actual hateful ones. They're the ones who will hate you because of your skin color and because of how you talk. And, if you don't want to, make your pronouns the number one part of your profile or your identity or your politics, they're going to hate you no matter how hard or how much you try to walk the line. It's almost like similar to these socialist countries like Venezuela. And obviously I love Venezuela, but they kind of try to appease the US. They try to be more, quote unquote, democratic and don't use the authority of the state to crack down on these CIA ops who are running around their country because they don't want to be accused of being authoritarian. Well, what the hell? Look at the media framing of every issue having to do with Venezuela in the past few years. They get called authoritarian anyways, so it's like no matter what you do, these neoliberals will hate you because ultimately they're not Marxists. They're obsessed with identity politics, not with class. And a lot of them are college students and professional managerial class, college administrators themselves, who are in this bubble where they themselves are trying not to get canceled, where they're trying to speak, in this PC way that's been enforced upon them by HR departments and whatever.
Let me just say real quick. Sorry, John. I know I'm stepping on you here.
White man.
What do you guys think? Should we extend the party tonight and just go further? We usually call it at 2 hours. How about this? Because we had a bit of a technical difficulty with the Discord. I got it back up now, kinda. If anyone wants to actually debate, right? You got to type in the chat so I can see it and I'll set it up. But otherwise, we're all just going to hang out and have a party if that's cool with you guys.
Let's do it. Yeah, I'm
all right. I'll be right back then. I just got to run down and inform the.
All right.
Go ahead, John. You got something, John?
Yeah. I mean, Eddie made some fantastic points. The other thing here is that, a lot of these kind of centering identity politics, it's so individualistic, right? It's like always about like my feelings. Oh, don't step on my, don't hurt my feelings. And that's really what it boils down to in many cases, and how toxic that is for a collective movement, for a movement of working class people is just so apparent. It's like, I recall that kind of famous DSA video that circulated recently where I think it was DSA, right? Where there was a big event happening. Some guy gets up onto the mic and he goes, "Hey guys, I'm very like sound sensitive, so if you guys could please like keep the volume down." And then immediately someone, which was funny in of itself, and then immediately someone jumps up, interrupts him, and is like, "Don't use gendered language," because he said guys. I'm just like, how is a revolutionary movement to liberate the working class ever supposed to gain steam if we're constantly having to go back and address the feelings of people that we hurt when we're trying to advance the substance and the actual essence of class struggle? It's like it's never going to move forward if the fixation is always on how everybody feels and people, these microaggressions and stuff. And I remember witnessing this in the protests in 2020 with Black Lives Matter and with George Floyd. And of course we saw how those protests were weaponized by the Democratic Party and all of these liberal forces to really just set the working class struggle back, I think, ultimately. But of course there were many grains of truth in the real anger that people felt seeing Black Americans get killed over and over again by the police. Like these are real things that are happening. The oppression in general of our police force in the United States, and how it doesn't serve to actually advance the public safety of the general population, but it serves to protect the private property of the people in control. And so these were the real elements of this impulse in this particular movement. But I remember, how many times like people would go up and make speeches trying to, call out the injustice. And even if they were making a good point, that the substance of the point resonated with the crowd and kind of got everybody onto the same page and united Black and white workers in the struggle against police oppression. How many people were like shouted down on the basis of some identity characteristic that wasn't in conformance with this like radical liberal ideology? You know, people get like, oh, let this person, and we saw with the Bernie example was another good one that Noah laid out. It's like, let this person speak because they're Black woman, Latina, lesbian, you know? And it's just like, Michael Prenti said it very well. It's like, we're so fixated on things that divide us when we should recognize that we all share these things in common. Like, we're all working people. And now more than ever, it's like we all experience many of the same things in daily society. We're all consuming the same products. And of course, certain populations and certain people experience things more acutely than others, but there's so much that binds us, and we're really missing an opportunity if we're just so fixated on these identity politics and notions of intersectionality and so on.
Yeah, I had to learn, similar to what Eddie laid out, not to take it personal, because I would take this so serious. I'm 46 years of age. I joined the movement when I was 14 years old. It's my 30-year anniversary. I've surrendered my lifeblood, my life energy, my life vitality to this. So with Palestine, most of the Palestine groups kicked me out. One group kicked me out because they said that in one of my speeches, I said something that somebody found that made them feel uncomfortable. But they would never tell me what I said, when I said it, and they couldn't tell me who felt uncomfortable, because that person felt uncomfortable that I would know that they felt uncomfortable. Next thing you know, I'm kicked out of the group. I've been fired. I've been doxxed. They took away my Twitter. FBI detained me. But okay, well, that's what the ruling class is supposed to do. But then the very groups that exist to support fired professors, doxxed professionals, it was so bizarre to me. I was caught up in this strange liberal house of mirrors. And that's really what recruited me to the Midwestern Marx and the ACP. Of course, looking back now, I'm relieved and I can laugh. And it was all meant to be. It's dialectical justice. But I can't lie. I took it personal. I was in fetal position because I thought that these professors, I thought they were my comrades. I talked to them about building community. And just to extend the theater of absurd before I passed the mic off, I had no idea we'd be talking about this. This is perfect. But I went to Columbia University. I was a basketball scholarship student, and so they had Columbia alumni for Palestine. So I was camped out at Columbia with the students, and when the FBI seized my phone and everything, they kicked me out of all these groups, WhatsApp groups, Signal groups, and that's another whole thing, security culture. Not one person from Columbia called me, how are you? That must have been difficult. How's your family doing? So they just kicked me out of these groups. Weeks go by and I'm like, why am I kicked out? I've endured like the ultimate sacrifices, clearly, because I'm traveling to international conferences and my boy, whatever. I finally, after like 5 weeks, I finally get in touch with the facilitator of this Columbia Alumni for Palestine WhatsApp group. You know what she told me over the course of a week or two? She tells me if I want to apply to be back in the WhatsApp group, I should go through my lawyer, for my lawyer to get in touch with her so they can talk it through. This stuff is embarrassing. It's laughable, but this is embarrassing. This is the left. No way. I mean, for me, the watershed moment was like 2016, 17. It was not like this before. I remember. It was not like this. It was not like this in Harlem. It was not like this in the Bronx. I remember when the pronoun thing started. I remember when it started. And of course, like the people of Harlem and the South Bronx, a lot, they're looking around like, you're gonna make a 60-year-old Dominican woman tell you that she's ella and suya? What? It was the theater of the absurd, and that was when I began to break. So for me, this is like a type of I don't know, coming out of the closet of the canceled type of party that Noah's throwing.
And John's so right that it's all narcissism, and it's such a block to a revolutionary movement. Like Danny and I took this so personally, I feel like, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this way who are now in ACP, because we can get along with anybody. Like I do not have I never have had these problems in my life. I've never had problems where, people think I'm occasionally you have fights or disagreements or whatever, but Danny and I can, for the most part, go up and talk to anybody on the street and get along with them, and build community with them. But these people are so narcissistic, they're willing to jump down your throat and attack you and call you a racist and the worst words, imaginable, the worst smears imaginable for saying something that offends them. And goes against their own personal identity. And that's what they view politics as an identity thing. And this is why it's such a blockage to revolutionary struggle, like what John was saying. Like, DSAs, how are they going to lead a revolutionary movement when they can't, hear aggressive, or they can't be around aggressive sense? And this is what I like about what Haas is always saying about how politics is war. Politics isn't personal, right? Sometimes politics can be very cynical even. You have to be strategic. And how can you do that when your organization is filled with narcissists who are always, canceling each other because they're personally offended by something? If we step on each other's toes or have disagreements in ACP, we talk it out. We call each other up on the phone and talk it out. And it's always about something substantive. It's never about, oh, you microaggressed me or whatever. It all is, it's so very individualistic and narcissistic, which is the antithesis of communism. Like look at you think the Cuban peasants and the Russian peasants, whose favorite way to try and get the crops to grow faster was to do pogroms against Jewish people. You think that they were all politically correct? No. But they, and this is almost, Lenin almost, this was very strategic and almost cynical in a way. He recognized that their interest was still opposed to the ruling class, and they could be used to overthrow the ruling class. And guess what? Then we can build 1 million schools and, institutions of higher education, and we can elevate the consciousness of these people, which is what actually gets to the root of racism, and real bigotry, and takes all of racism's power away and turns it into just an individualistic thing. So it's just so ridiculous. And these people call themselves communists, and they have no, like, I don't know. When I first started calling myself a communist, I felt such a duty to read. And I know everybody in this group right now reads a shit ton, because we feel an obligation that we are accepting the ideology and the label of communist, which has been, upheld by some of the greatest heroes and most amazing human beings in all of history. Che Guevara, Vladimir Lenin, Mao Zedong, right? So how are you going to steal that ideology, steal that label, and then not do the work of educating yourself and understanding that, no, I'm part of a collective struggle. It's not about my fifis. It's not about my feelings and making other people walk on eggshells around me, or I might explode on them, right? Che was known for disciplining people if they wouldn't do their reading, right? If they wouldn't dedicate themselves to the struggle collectively. But you never heard Che Guevara freaking out because someone said something mean to him that offended him personally.
100%. Look, and I say this all the time. A communist is not something you just decide to call yourself one day because you think a certain way. What we need to do is make the word communist something we have to earn, something that is bestowed upon you by the community, right? It needs to be something you achieve, something you build yourself into, because think about it. What's the materialist view of what a communist is, right? Of what anything is. It's whatever the world around it determines that it becomes, right? It becomes what it is. And for communism, for a communist, what does that mean? It has to be someone who embodies the transition to a higher mode of life. So it takes a lot of work to really earn calling yourself this word. This word needs to have a lot more honor attached to it than the left of the last period of history would give it. Because they'll just call themselves communists and then run around acting like spoiled brats. And it ain't right. And we got a question that came in perfectly during Eddie's rant. Manuel says, but politics is about identity. How can you project, or how can your project overlook ethnicity and religion? We don't overlook these things at all. We say instead that there are different forms that the class struggle takes on. And especially in the US, the Christian church has been a giant part of our class struggle. Martin Luther King Jr., possibly our greatest revolutionary in the entire country's history, came to us from where? From the pulpit of a Baptist church, right? The Black church especially has been involved with revolutionary organizing. Regarding ethnicity, the Black freedom struggle, again, the primary form of our class struggle. We got a couple of super stickers I want to get to. Thank you, Starside, for the $8 and Popers for the 5. We said amazing show tonight. Thanks, guys. You're welcome, brother. We're happy to do it. And then there's one other question that I just lost. Hold on a second. I'm sorry, guys. El Yabu asked what happened to Carlos. Fun fact, Carlos is actually tied up in my basement right now. He and I have different identities, so it became a thing, right? He used a word I didn't like. He got my pronouns wrong, and so I had to tie him up and put him in the basement. That's what he gets.
Oh man, what's so funny about all of this is, like, here's the great irony. You know, people see us as like this kind of aggressive.
Real quick, John. Carlos is actually in Venezuela. Sorry, go ahead.
Carlos, yeah. Carlos is in Venezuela. It's not probably not as bad as being tied up in Noah's basement, but no, he's doing great. He's doing great work out there. I mean, we've shared some things, so go watch what Carlos has been doing in Venezuela. It's been absolutely fantastic if you haven't. But you know what's funny about all of this, and here's some irony here, is I feel like I've become so much more tolerant in general since I have left this ideology. You know, we get this reputation for being like, you know, very aggressive and whatever, and we have this kind of aesthetic going on. But in general, you know, I think back to, because I come from the left, like you guys. You know, for people who don't know, you know, I come from this kind of new left, right? I was like you guys. I was a big supporter of Bernie Sanders. I like kind of considered myself in my youth like a left liberal. I didn't really know, you know, I didn't know communist politics. I didn't know the real history of socialism. And you know, at my kind of peak, right before I kind of had this break, I was so judgmental of just normal, regular working people who didn't have the same level of consciousness as me, because I was, you know, had the privilege to attend liberal universities and was indoctrinated to some degree by this identity politics and by these ideas about intersectionality and so on and so on. And it's like, for anybody that didn't understand it, it was so, you know, I was so judgmental often to just regular people. And instead of taking this notion that we need to build something together, work with you, you know, where you are, take the kernels of truth and where you recognize the real problems in society and continue to build them, it was more about shutting our box, keeping our, you know, our liberal bubble, or, you know, I call it liberal bubble now. We thought we were leftists, but like keeping our little bubble intact and keeping you outside of it until you have this conformance with my ideological outlook. Otherwise, I'm not going to work with you. You know, I'm not even, you know, I might not even be your friend. And it's just like, this is so, it's so noxious and so just poisonous to any type of real working class politics. And so that is like, that's kind of the irony there. It's like they talk about having all this tolerance and, you know, understanding people's different struggles based on their different identities. But if you don't have this level of conformance with this like radical liberal ideology, then there's absolutely no tolerance for you. And then, Eddie, what you said is so correct. It's narcissistic, but even beyond that, it's like selfish. It's like positioning yourself as the ultimate arbiter of truth instead of engaging in this kind of mutual dialogue with the working class to, you know, discover itself. And it's like, you know, for this, like I point to a lot of Mao's works on practice. Like, it's through practice itself that we are that the struggle is illuminated to us, and we know how to build a working class movement. And that requires us actually interacting with and listening to the working class. It doesn't mean that we tail their reactionary beliefs, but it means understanding their conditions, understanding their way of life, instead of coming from our ivory towers and then dictating to them what the appropriate form of consciousness is.
And Che said very similar things to Mao and on practice. That's so true. Like, I'll let Danny go after this, so I'm kind of butting in, but it's like I was almost falling into that, where I remember I had a few interactions with working class people where I was like calling them racist and lecturing them, you know, for saying jokes that they didn't even actually mean. And it's like now it like the leftists become the least tolerant people because they're always looking for something to be offended by. And it's like, you know, even if somebody says something that's incorrect or reactionary, we can correct it, but it doesn't have to be you're canceled, you're a piece of shit, because that's anti-dialectical in and of itself, because that's seeing people as static. You said racist thing once, you said racist joke once, you are a racist for the rest of your life. Well, what happened to everything is in a constant state of change? You know, that's one of the core principles of dialectical thought. So I would argue that the ACP is the most tolerant party in the U.S.
Yeah, it's beautiful. In all my years in the left, I think things got much worse in the mid 2000s. I never heard an orientation that drew the class lines in the Midwest, specifically between the propagandized and the propagandists, between the class enemy and those who have fallen victim to all of the xenophobia, Islamophobia, homophobia. It all comes from on high. But it was a general disgust, not just with Trump, but with all of Trump country and the entire United States. I never heard the term national nihilism until I started working with you all. So I feel relieved. You know, my mental health is, y'all have seen it with your own eyes, because it hurt. You give everything to a cause. I got 2 more points, Noah. You want to jump in quick?
No, I just want to real quick. Yeah. I think the reason you hadn't turned national nihilism is because the sort of movers and shakers, the leadership, the money people in the left of the last period of history, they kept the texts that would have this stuff, that would teach this kind of thing to us, away from people. You weren't given Dimitrov, right? You weren't given Foster. They push you in the direction of texts that you can sort of misread metaphysically and never get to these specific problems. That's all. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I got a few classic anecdotes before I pass the mic. Back in the day, went to this kind of non-profit-y academic conference on political prisoners, which of course is very important. Free them all, free all the political prisoners. But we were there in Minnesota, and I went with a good buddy of mine, working class dude. Long story short, we were in the second, third day of workshops, and we got paired up with random people, strangers, to do these activities. One person speaks for 5 minutes. What's your vision for this nonprofit? Then the other person speaks. My boy got paired up, this random woman comrade, and she had a breakdown. She had whatever, nothing to do with the workshops or whatever. She had a breakdown. She was going through what she was going through. The facilitator grabs the mic and insinuates that my boy made her cry through the activity. 100 or 200 people. This is like, remember that movie Get Out? It's like leftist science fiction gone wrong. If y'all haven't seen Get Out, classic critique of liberalism. It's Jordan Peele from Key and Peele. So all of a sudden there's like 200 sets of eyes on my boy, working class dude, not very experienced. And he's looking around like, this is the theater of the absurd. And everyone's insinuating that somehow, because of his whiteness, he's a retired boxer too, blah, blah, blah. He's just guilty. The last anecdote, another comrade was thrown out of the left because he didn't trust Pfizer. He didn't trust the vaccines. The vaccines come from the medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex. They don't come from Cuba. They don't come from Maurice Bishop in Grenada. They don't come from the Sandinistas. How could you not question Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer? These are the people that make Viagra. Instead of telling you, stop watching so much football and go for a walk, do something good for your heart. No, just take Viagra, right? So I'm really going to trust them with my vaccine. Pfizer, right? He was kicked out of the left. You can't make this stuff up. So I began to characterize all this that I was some type of refugee or survivor of the left. I never thought in my entire life that I would have all these critiques of the left. I thought we were all leftists and the left and la izquierda. And my God, yeah, I've never felt so free, and it's taken a long time.
What do you think, Daniel? We haven't heard from you in a minute. You were just chilling backstage. Look, this guy like avoids actually showing his face so much. I made him come on. Like he told me, "Oh, I gotta leave." Then I see him chilling backstage. Like you ain't getting out of here that easy.
Yeah, no, I mean, on the topic of cancel culture and identity politics, I definitely also went through it. I mean, if you're of a certain age and you were on the left, like you were basically required to go through all of these types of procedures. And of course, when the BLM moment happened, it became like a flashpoint, right? Like oppression. Everything kind of was about, oppression and identity and intersectionality, which is not to say that obviously that, and I think it was just very convincing at the time, right? That statistically speaking, that Black people are obviously more oppressed, and it kind of brought up these questions of how can we overcome that? And I think it just became this this idea or this mission that people thought that somehow that we were as individuals going to like somehow individually defeat oppression in our individual lives, and it just didn't have like a dialectical materialist analysis. Didn't have a true Marxist politics. And a lot of these organizations and groups, I mean, they check Marx. It's not like they don't know about Marx. They don't check Lenin though. Like Stalin is like, don't who, So it's very much like a type of like eclectic sort of pop politics that you find in the left. If you were of a certain age, and I'm the kind of person that like if I get involved in something, I want to make an impact. I want to do work. I don't want to like mess around with somebody like some groups or orgs that aren't going to have power. And for a long time, these leftist organizations, they had a monopoly on that power. They monopolized it, and the cancel culture was as a method, a tool that they actually used to monopolize it, to like control the discourse and to control people. So yeah, it's I took the L like 2 or 3 years ago. Like Hans was saying, like if you're a leftist, just take the L. Just take the L. We got to start over. We got to like rebuild from like a Marxist foundation, and that's fine. Like the sooner you do it, the better. You'll feel better. You'll feel like you actually have something material to stand on, and it really makes all the difference in your politics, in your activism, in your organizing.
Thank God that era is over. And their hold over so many people has been broken. And I am so unbelievably proud to have been able to play a small part in making that happen. I really am. Look, let me tell you guys a story. The first ever meeting that I had in the old party. They go around the room, and these are 6 people who know each other. But they all say their pronouns before they talk. It's like an AA meeting, you got to say you're an alcoholic, right? It's ridiculous. Like, and so they get to me and I'm like, and they're like, what are your pronouns? I'm like, oh, like you can call me any pronouns. I don't care. You can call me any nouns. I don't care. Right. And the looks I got,
That's
just
sacrilege.
seething hatred. Right now, fast forward a week later, I was, and Marxism is something I've always had a lot of experience with. Right. I was talking to a very young trans individual, right, who was screaming that the 70-year-old people in the party wouldn't call this person the pronouns they preferred, right? And I go, look, this is all new to them, man. You got to be patient. Are you a communist or not? Right? If you're a communist, the point is to win them over to your point of view. But this simple thing I said, you got to be patient with old people who don't understand your weird gender ideology, right? They just don't get it. This got me in so much trouble with HR. I literally had to go to a meeting with 2 other people to teach me about trans issues, right? Which basically was like nothing. This girl who like uses they pronouns telling me about how put upon she was when she's literally coming from class at an Ivy League college and I'm coming from a 14-hour shift. Right? That's where we were. And this is the atmosphere that the middle classes thrive in because it lets them put themselves on a level where they're a victim of something. When the working class talk about uniting, we don't talk about it as victims. We talk about it as something, as a struggle for power, for genuine power. Why is the ACP pulling ahead when all of these organizations failed for decades and decades? It's because simply we want to win. We need to win. And all they want to do is make you feel sorry for their own victimhood. And I'm sick of it. And I am so goddamn glad that era is over. And yes, Eddie. Oh, what's up, brother?
Oh, shoot.
The high bailiff's here. Let's go. That's it. It's a party tonight.
Is that a gavel you're holding?
It's a gavel. It's a gavel. Ready for law and order. Law and order.
What's up, brother? I told you guys get ready for some super secret surprise guests. I was not lying. Drake's coming up. Don't worry.
What's good? How's everybody doing? Loving the conversation. Let's go.
Doing great. Yeah, we're taking down identity politics and venting about our experiences on the left. I'm sure you've had plenty of your own, ridiculous HR meetings and whatnot.
Oh, did John leave?
What happened to John?
John can never leave.
Apparently
He's
he
in.
left.
He's in
John,
forever.
come back. Text me if you need back another link, brother.
No, it's true. Listen, I went through it. I went through it in a bunch of different orgs. I know Danny and I are from that same generation. I remember back in the day. Remember the 90s, anti-globalization riots, the early 2000s, the protests. First of all, 9/11 truthers. They're still around, but I remember them being at everything. That was the best. They were sort of like, remember Building 7. Remember Building 7. They were always like screaming from the back of the room, and people would be like, come on. And then, we had the Iraq War protests against the Iraq War. It was very, very active, very diverse, and none of this identity stuff. It was all about we're anti-war from all sides. Catholic workers, Muslim community, Christian peace, Quakers, everybody was there, right? And then mid 2000s to late 2000s, we got the financial crisis. Then everything goes haywire. Queer politics comes from the fringes to the mainstream, and it becomes a dominant aspect of the movement. I remember giving a speech. For those who are interested can do the deep dive. I gave a speech in 2000. I think it was the summer of 2012, if I'm not mistaken. I went to the University of Victoria, gave a speech against pornography from a Marxist feminist perspective, right? I was castigated by everybody in the room, except one old woman who was like, I'm uphold Stalin, Everybody else was like, you are patriarchal. This is anti-feminist. This is against sex workers. Blah blah blah. Pornography can liberate us.
Wait,
And I said,
can I interrupt real quick, Chris? When did we start calling prostitutes sex workers, by the way?
this
When-
time
when
period.
did
This was the time period, the late 90s, early 2000s, but it really got big in the mid to late 2000s and then onwards in the 2010s. And so,
Okay, okay.
we really had a situation. So I gave the speech. I thought I was crazy. I mean, I was 24 years old, just finished. I was going to I was actually in grad school at the time. And it was a very surprising experience. It was the Society for Socialist Studies conference. And I remember it, I remember just being like basically torn apart. And then I started to realize that some of the things that I was reading were not adding up. And I started to question myself. I went back into the left in all different forms, and CPUSA at the time, which I was involved in, was a nothing burger. I remember Sam Webb's time; it was horrible. It was abysmal, right? And but boy, the worst was the anarchist scene. When I got involved with the anarchist scene or the ultras, horrible. Everything was like a tribunal. Everything was like a tribunal. Like I was afraid sometimes to speak because I knew that I was going to get called out, and the litany, it was like, you know what it felt like? It felt like Inquisition. Remember Mel Brooks, Inquisition? What a show. That's it. It was like,
No one expects the Inquisition. Yeah.
That's it. It was like that all the time. Like you could not escape the anarchist gaze on you. Like any wrong move, that's it, anathema. And I thought to myself, after a couple years around that circle, whether it was IWW, whether it was insurrection or anarchist movement abroad, it really was like if you made one bad step, you were exiled, you were ostracized, you were a heretic, you're an untouchable now. Nobody can go near you. I thought to myself, what kind of politics is this? What kind of politics is this? It was absolutely, forget about fetish. It was like purity idolatry. It was a form of idolatry, really, if we want to think of it in those religious terms. It was, if you do not subscribe to this set and are always beholden to this set of norms and values, you're out. No salvation for you, right? We remember the classic phrase from the early church, extra ecclesiam nulla salus. In Latin, without, outside of the church, there is no salvation, right? Outside of that little community, there's no salvation. They were like an apocalyptic sect, right? So when you think about it in those terms, I thought to myself, my God, it was like a cult. It was like a cult. It's like cult mentality, right? Religious, ultra-religious, they put the Orthodox to shame, the Orthodox of all religions, right? The most pure, the most true to the word, right? And so I have to be honest, since I came to ACP, through CPUSA, through PCUSA, through all these ups and downs and organizations, I can breathe free. We can joke. We can have a good time. We can self-criticize. We can criticize in an atmosphere that isn't going to tear us down or crucify us or put us into some medieval torture instrument. We can be ourselves. We can be ourselves and we can grow together, right? We're constantly growing, but we allow each other to grow. We allow each other to fall, right? From my theology days in the Orthodox seminary, of course, the classic quote, you fall down and you get up again. What the monks always talk about. Every day you fall down and you get up again. That's the communist ethos. That's the communist ethos. That's why monasteries are proto-communist communities, right? They operate in a highly collectivized way. And so when you look at that, of course we fall down I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. But we get up again. We help each other up. We pull each other up. Only through that can we achieve victory. Only through that. There's no other way. There's no shortcut. No matter how pure your ideology is, without the masses, without the working class, without the people, le peuple, behind you, how are you going to achieve anything? You can't achieve anything. You've achieved revolution in your mind. In your mind. The most idealistic, the most utopian. But that doesn't prove anything, right?
Chris, let me tell you what this reminds me of, man. Wage, Labor, and Capital by Marx, right? It's a short little piece that Marx writes, very basic, but in it he talks about the capitalists and uses this parallel where he talks about them as armies going to the field of battle, right? But the capitalist is also at war with the soldiers in his own ranks. And you can't win a war that way, right? This is how these liberals and anti-communists and anarchists and all of these people that call themselves the left before we came on the scene act. They're always at war with the soldiers in their own ranks. In fact, they're at war so desperately at war with the soldiers in their own ranks that they forget that they're fighting an actual war against an enemy across the field. I don't know. That's just how I see it. I drew this and I wanted to show you guys. Pretty cool,
that's
right?
pretty sweet.
That's
You
me as a
should be an
ninja
artist.
stabbing a wizard.
Oh.
Oh my God.
That's what I do when you guys are talking, by the way.
You should have a drawing competition with Jackson.
Yeah,
Listen,
he's good.
Listen, Noah, you're better than 99% of the so-called psychologists and psychotherapists who are drawing while you're speaking on the chair while you're on the couch. And they're
I
like,
didn't show you guys
uh-huh.
like the rest is my notes to myself. I didn't show you that because it's all swear words.
I want to take a second and say, I mean, it's different probably for people who are from Danny and Chris's generation who mostly do their work on the ground. And, you know, they've kind of adapted to this era of internet politics that we're in and using the internet as a tool. But like, as far as opening up a space for criticizing the left on the internet, I have to give a shout out to Haas, our executive chairman. Because the infrared community, really what it did was it had the infrared vision. I now understand the name infrared, to root out the fakers and the liars and the wreckers on the left just by challenging them to debates, asking them to defend their arguments, and standing on business in real Marxism-Leninism. He got, you know, the reason I didn't want to do it, I always, you know, had similar thoughts about the left, but I didn't want to get banned from TikTok. You know, he gave up his Twitch account just to get called a grifter every day. So he really opened up this space for groups like Midwestern Marx to come in, you know, with maybe we weren't as harsh in our critique as Haas, but it opened up a space for us to make that critique. So, you know, he's, you know, a human being like all of us. I'm not here to just say that he's perfect and all knowing or whatever, but he had the courage and the foresight to call this crap out and open up a space for something like the ACP to emerge. And, you know, that's why he's the chairman of the party.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of bravery to do that. I think, I mean, both have been necessary. You guys have been doing a lot of Marxist education, which has been so critical and actually centering the discussion back around Marx and Lenin. What I find amazing and what I've kind of identified is that a lot of these so-called leftists, what they're really starting from is this liberal ideological worldview, and then trying to kind of pepper in, you know, maybe a phrase from Mao or Lenin here and there to justify this this belief that they already held. And, you know, I'm sad that Eddie's not here. I think he's going to be right back. But in this TikTok live that they were doing the other day with this individual, you know, who's claiming to, you know, I've gone to university and read Marx and all this stuff, and was citing the Communist Manifesto and was talking about how Marx was critical of the nuclear family. And I'm just like, the term nuclear family didn't even come into existence until 1920, and it wasn't even popularized until like 1950. And, you know, it's this kind of notion about, oh, we're going to promote this hyper liberal view of the family and gender, and then we're going to go back and cherry pick and maybe even totally revise and lie about what Marx and Lenin and all of these others said about these subjects. And it's like, I find it curious because, anyway, I was just talking about how on this TikTok live, this individual was talking about how Marx and Engels were critical of the nuclear family, a term that didn't even exist in the time that Marx and Engels were writing. It was also mischaracterizing their analysis of like the family unit and of relations between men and women. And we rightfully pointed out, you know, with the abolition of capitalist property relations, that this would open up the space for true monogamy, right, between men and women, based on love, not predicated on property relations, would finally be possible. And so we had to make this clear. This person was arguing that, oh, Marx was against like this concept of, you know, the kind of standard family, you know, the prototypical family of husband, wife, children, and grandchildren in the community.
Marx was so happily married with so many kids. It's crazy.
Right. And what I find very curious is like, it's the societies that have undergone a Marxist-Lenin, in many cases, a Marxist-Leninist revolution or a communist revolution. You look at China, you look at Russia, and many others, where you still see this continuity of the family as a primary unit in the community. and it's valued and it's held as very important, right? In order to continue these kind of community values, these family, that this tradition, the tradition, and the overall structures of society, their perpetuity. And so instead of like having this, and Grayson actually wrote about this wonderfully when he was talking about Marxism and tradition in the journal. Everybody go subscribe to the journal, by the way, if you haven't yet, because it's amazing. We have some great editions coming up. But Marxism in this revolution is not this destructive flame, which many leftists kind of purport that it is, that just destroys everything that was old and replaces it with something totally new, arising out of this vacuum of a fundamentally new basis. But instead, it's a purifying flame, right, which sublates the old and takes the harmonious elements of things like traditional family relationships and moves them into the future and into the current context in a way that is harmonious and works with not only the kind of the modern relations that we have, but also looks back at history and identifies what worked well, what gave human communities a level of community, a level of interconnectedness that is made, that is very important to being a very human in the first place, right? It's this notion that we don't exist as individuals. We exist as part of this totality, and that we can only recognize ourselves fully as individuals by making this recognition that we are also part of a community. And so, leftists, I think, fail to recognize these things, and it's quite sad, and it's, it's very important. And I just want to stress, maybe end on this note, to actually go back. Don't just cherry pick the quotes and the popular quotes that leftists use on Twitter to cite Marx and Lenin and Mao, but actually read the text, read the full context of what they were saying and understand the history and the circumstances with which, under which they were writing these things. I think it's just so critical.
Yeah, and Marx's definition of alienation, that's a big piece of it. We're alienated from our species being. We're alienated under capitalism. So we search for community in the left, who then flips on us. And I think that's what hurts so much. And I think that what we have before us is a historical golden opportunity with the ACP. Build something from scratch, build it up properly, with respect towards all, with malice towards only the ruling class. Our enemy is not how anybody defines themselves in terms of sexual orientation or nothing like that. We know who our enemy is, because I think for a lot of the comrades out there with all these frustrations that we're articulating, it would be easy to dialectically go the opposite way and have a certain resentment against this group or that group. And that's something that in our leadership, we're always going to resist. We know who our enemy is. We're not going to get caught up in any of this divide and conquer politics. So it's super exciting. What else came up listening to y'all? Some of the people who canceled me were former mentees and former students, but then they got $85,000 salaries from nonprofits and foundations, and suddenly they didn't know me. And that to me was like, that's the antithesis of communist behavior. Adam Clayton Powell had that quote, "The day will come when to be called the communist is the greatest honor that you can render another human being." It goes back to a point that Noah was making. Yeah, and I think I went through cancel culture stuff. I lose track. It's tough to count. Something like 20, 21 times, whatever. They would always write these letters, the letters straight out of a corporate human resources department, completely foreign to the way that we talk to one another. Just another quick anecdote. One time we were organizing in the streets of the Bronx, and one of the comrades got a little caught up, and his eyes were wandering. So his eyes got some beautiful body or whatever. He got a whole sit down just for looking. And they told him, you can't do that. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't even notice. I'm sorry." So this stuff is laughable, but it's real. And we see the numbers going up and up and up. There's about over 1,200 people here, listening to us. And I think I didn't know this was the coming out party. You know, leave it to Noah to get us all together spontaneously. This is so beautiful, and it reminds me of that song by Kendrick Lamar. They not like us. This is the petty bourgeoisie.
Oh,
This
Danny,
is all
Danny,
we know how to do.
Danny, we're on the Drake side now after he's donating to the party.
He gave us 50 subs. All of the lies about Drake, it's all slander. Solidarity with Drake. Give us more money.
More money, please, Drake. Look,
Uphold Marxism, Leninism, Drakeism.
Very true. Look, John made a really good point though that I really want to. Not that Danny's point wasn't great, it was, but John said that what these sort of petty bourgeois radicals, these liberals, these anti-communist, we should just always call them anti-communist because it's what they are. But that gets confusing because they try to pretend they're communists. What they do is when they sort of try to look at Marx or Lenin or anyone, they do it not to learn, but to try to verify their preconceptions, right? And so they already had this sort of notion in their head, so they twist and distort or cherry pick Marx or whoever to do it. And that's how we get to such absurd things as saying, you know, Marx wanted to abolish the family and that kind of stuff, right? But it's also how you get to oh god, my mind just completely blanked. I'm so sorry, guys. Like, it's getting late for me. Someone else go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, all of these are so true, and it's just like you think about even things like the church, right? Because we hear this one's a big one too, where there's a lot of criticism about the church in the American context, especially from the left. And some of it is justified, right? Eddie was saying the church has been at some points a tool for class liberation. It was, Martin Luther King and the Baptist Church. But then at other times, we see these mega churches, which basically serve to, in their own way, kind of revise or cherry pick quotes of the Bible that kind of minimize like Jesus's teachings around, it's harder for a rich person to fit through the eye, or it's harder for a camel to fit through an eye of a needle than a rich person to go to heaven, or many of the things that Jesus talked about in regards to having humility and these sorts of things. And then, we'll cherry pick these kind of other dogmatic aspects of the Bible they elevate and talk about this is how, not to be sinful or how to live a moral life. And so we see, all of these things have a certain context to them. They're not black and white. And the same thing was true, even in the history of like Christianity, how Lenin and then ultimately Stalin interacted and viewed the Orthodox Church and the corruption there. And, now we see in Russia, the Orthodox Church is a very, in some ways, healthy basis because it was reconstituted. A lot of that corruption was rooted out by the Bolsheviks. And now we see, at least to some degree, a continuity where the Russian Orthodox Church doesn't necessarily serve the same regressive ends that a lot of the evangelical churches do here in the United States. And so, I think that what I really love about our organization, again, aside from the fact that we are characterized as being these like very intense people, we're very non-dogmatic, I think. And I think that this is a very important aspect of Marxism. It's to evaluate all of history, locate ourselves within the proper historical context and understand how we build a working class movement with that understanding. So, this has been great, man. I've loved getting to talk with all you guys, and Chris coming in was really the cherry on top. Hi, Bailiff. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming tonight. Thank you to everyone in the chat, everyone asking questions, the few callers we took before we had a technical problem. Thank you to everybody. Tonight's been a great Noah's show. We're gonna go out the same way we do every night.
Well, before we go out, we did the Kendrick reference, but this is Views from the Six, right? For Drake. Let's go.
Does anyone have any parting words for the audience?
I would just love to say I'm so proud of the work ACP continues to do. I'm so proud of all of you, of everyone in the party, in all their capacities, whether it's in a small way or in a large way, in any way that they can contribute and that they continue to contribute and do the work and do the studying and do the hard work. Really, solidarity, red salute to everyone. We are doing it. We are struggling. We're going to make it. We're going to win. I want everyone to have an optimism always, to wake up optimistic, to go to bed optimistic. Because listen, to be nihilistic is to feed into the culture that we are doomsday's upon us. It's the end times. Nothing's going to change. But those of us who have children see the sparkle in their eyes. Those of us who see the youth, and of course, as a teacher, I see the youth every day. We need to give hope to the people. The masses yearn for hope. They are poisoned every day that there is no hope. And so they resort to drugs, to violence, to self-harm, to depression, to pharmaceutical products that they need to take to feel good. We need to give people purpose in life. And that purpose is to build a better world, a world of peace, and a world where everyone can join hands and build something magnificent for all the generations to come. So let's keep going, ACP. ACP all the way, onwards to victory, comrades.
There we go. See you guys next week.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations. We've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in a song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The International idea